Welcome to This Explainer. So, picture this. It's March 8, 2014. A massive Boeing 777, literally one of the most advanced, highly tracked machines ever built by human engineering, just completely vanishes. There's no distress call, no clear radar trail. It's just gone. I mean, it sounds like the setup for a sci-fi movie, right? But it is entirely terrifyingly real. Today, we're diving straight into the facts, the data, and the evidence behind the enigma of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370, which is pretty universally considered the greatest aviation mystery in modern history.
Let's start with part 1, the disappearance. So this was supposed to be your completely standard, everyday red-eye flight from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia over to Beijing. But the timeline goes off the rails incredibly fast. It all starts out normally enough. Takeoff happens at 12:41 a.m. local time. Less than an hour into the flight, air traffic control gets their final, totally routine radio check-in from the cockpit. But then, almost immediately after that sign-off, the aircraft's transponder simply stops transmitting. That's the device that constantly pings the plane's location and altitude to the ground. It just goes entirely dark. And then, military radar picks up a really chilling detail. The plane didn't just keep cruising north toward China. Instead, it made this sharp, totally unprompted course change, banking back across the Malay Peninsula.
Now, before we get too deep into the weeds of satellite data and radar tracks, we really need to pause on this number right here, 239. It's so easy to get caught up in the mechanics of a missing plane and treat it like a giant puzzle, but we have to remember what this number actually means. We're talking about 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board, 239 real people who were just expecting to touch down in Beijing later that morning.
Which brings us to part 2, the global search.
When a commercial airliner drops off the map, every single second counts. Initially, search teams were actually looking in completely the wrong spot, mostly because that bizarre, sudden turn wasn't understood right away. But then we hit this massive pivot point in the investigation. Experts started analyzing these highly technical automated satellite pings, or handshakes, coming from the aircraft systems, and the data revealed something absolutely staggering. The plane hadn't just crashed right after going dark, it actually kept flying for several more hours. That one realization completely changed the entire game, forcing search teams to shift their focus way down into this vast, incredibly hostile and remote stretch of the southern Indian Ocean.
The scale of what happened next is frankly hard to wrap your head around. We're talking dozens of countries pooling their resources together, making it one of the largest and definitely most expensive search efforts in the history of aviation. Technologically, they threw the whole shebang at it. Fleets of ships, coordinated air grids, underwater drones scanning the deep sea floor, cutting-edge sonar, you name it. And yet, despite all of that unprecedented effort, the result is just stunning. The main wreckage of that Boeing 777 has never been found.
Moving on to part 3, clues wash ashore.
After years of staring at an empty ocean, it really felt like this mystery might literally never yield a single physical clue. But the ocean is always moving. Over the years, the current slowly carried pieces of the aircraft thousands of miles across the water. Suddenly, the story shifted from underwater sonar to actual, tangible evidence washing up on the beaches of the western Indian Ocean, specifically in places like Reunion Island, Madagascar, and Mozambique. Aviation experts analyzed these parts meticulously, and they definitively matched some of them straight back to the missing Boeing 777.
So, the big takeaway here, we finally had physical proof. Even though the main fuselage and those crucial black boxes are still lost in the deep, this debris absolutely, conclusively proved that the aircraft did in fact crash into the ocean. It really grounded this whole wild mystery in a tragic reality. It wasn't some phantom glitch, it was a physical machine that met a violent end in the water.
And that leads us straight into part 4, unanswered questions. Because, look, knowing that it crashed doesn't really explain why it crashed. Despite the massive global search and those scattered pieces of debris, the core enigma is still completely unsolved. The facts we have, honestly, just lead to deeper mysteries. First up, why did a plane flying a totally normal, straight path to Beijing suddenly pull a hard turn, cross back over the Malay Peninsula, and just head out toward the open ocean? I mean, what could possibly prompt that kind of massive navigational shift out of nowhere?
And equally baffling, why the radio silence? Transponders and comm systems in modern aircraft are incredibly robust. They are built with redundancies. They don't just randomly switch off. So was this loss of communication a deliberate, calculated move to hide the plane's location? Or was it the unintentional result of some massive cascading electrical failure?
That silence from the cockpit is just deafening.
And finally, we have what is easily the most chilling question of the whole bunch. We know from the satellite pings that this plane kept flying for hours and hours over the southern Indian Ocean until it literally ran out of fuel. So, what was happening inside that cabin during all that time? It's this terrifying, totally blank spot in the timeline that investigators have been desperately trying to piece together.
Because of those massive blank spots, the aviation world is essentially split into two primary camps. Theory 1 points to human intervention. This is the idea that someone in the cockpit deliberately altered the plane's course and manually severed communications. Theory 2 points to a catastrophic onboard emergency. Think along the lines of a rapid, devastating fire or massive depressurization that completely incapacitated the crew, basically leaving the plane flying on autopilot until the engines died. Now, we are looking at this completely impartially, and I want to make that absolutely clear. Neither of these theories has been conclusively proven. The definitive data just isn't there yet to rule one out and confirm the other.
Ultimately, why do we keep obsessing over this? Well, it comes back to the human impact. More than a decade later, the disappearance of MH370 continues to just profoundly affect the families of those 239 people. They've had to endure years of shifting theories, false hopes, and just agonizing uncertainty. Finding the aircraft's final resting place isn't just about solving a massive engineering puzzle. It's about finally bringing some closure and long-awaited answers to the people who were left behind.
MH370 is a case that just continues to haunt investigators, journalists, and everyday people all over the globe. We have scattered pieces of the puzzle, but the box itself is still missing. Which leaves us with one final, profound thought for today. With all of our modern technology, our satellite tracking, and our hyper-connected world, will the ocean ever actually give up its secrets? Will we ever truly solve the world's greatest aviation mystery?